Thank you all. Everybody get a handout and a pink sheet. If not, grab them from the back. Just so you know ahead of time, not everything that's in the handout is on, not everything that's in my PowerPoint is on the handout. So you may see some slides up here and they're not going to be on your PowerPoint, okay? All right, a little bit, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So this is my first time presenting to this group, and I have expertise in one very small area. So as you all know, as you go to school and you learn more, you realize you know some things about one very small area, right? So for you, it may be a small area of vision, or it may be an area about deaf and hard of hearing. It may be around working with families. So when I talked to Sherry on Monday to kind of confirm what was happening, all of a sudden I started to panic a little bit of, wow, you have a lot of expertise about a range of ages, abilities, disabilities in this room. Am I correct in making that assumption? Okay. And I know a very little bit about early childhood special ed. So we're going to do some brainstorming along the day, some how does this apply to, and if I use the wrong terms, correct me. How does this apply to children who have visual impairments? How does this apply to children who are deaf or hard of hearing? Am I saying the terms correctly? Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. And how does this apply to individuals who are over age 8? Because my area is kids who are younger, okay? So I have a teenager, and believe me, I know why I went into early childhood. Because Brett and I were talking earlier, he has a middle schooler, I have a high schooler. Woo! I'm glad I worked with the little ones, because these are hard ages and the issues are different, right, around social emotional. So I'm going to talk about the issues in our model, which is a pyramid model, and I'll talk to you about that. But then we're going to have some discussion and some brainstorming of what does that mean for children who are visually impaired? What does that mean for children who are deaf or hard of hearing? What might friendship skills look like for teenagers versus younger children? Okay? So you can't just sit there and be passive all day. I'm going to expect you to do some, okay, here's what I do, here's what I do, here's what I've seen, all right? We on the same page? Yes. All right, great. All right, a little bit about myself. I have 4 siblings. One was born 8 years after this was taken, but my sister, so I'm right here. My sister at the top was born legally blind in one eye. And in the late 50s, as you all know probably better than I do, my parents were told, she'll never see, she'll never be independent, you should institutionalize her, right? We've all heard these things. Well, my sister has 2 kids who are wonderful. She has a job. She works as a teaching assistant with kids with autism in a school in the suburbs. She drives a car, not at night, and sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking, but that's my early experience around disabilities. My mom and dad said, no, she is just part of our family. She is just going to be like all the other kids. And my parents had 4 kids within about 48 months. So they didn't have time to think other than you're coming with the crew and move on. So anyway, that was my early experience. Small, but you know what, always a part of my life we're all just, inclusivity was a part of my life right from the beginning. How many of you know the Philip Rock Center up in Glen Ellen? So I worked there for 3 years, a long time ago. Hence, I have a little bit of experience, with children who are deaf and blind. Loved the school, worked in early childhood in that school. At the time, it was called the Illinois Deaf Blind School. Working there got me really interested in 2 things. Peer relationships, because I would watch the children in our class push the peers out of the way to find the adults. Because for them, the adults were the ones who gave them access to things. So the adults were the one who helped them if they needed help, who gave them comfort if they needed it, who could give them access to food, materials, whatever. So I became very interested in social relationships, peer relationships. I also became very interested in social communication. I was amazed when I would watch those little children take a sign like more and generalize it from more food, more something they wanted to eat or drink, to more play or more tickle. And I would think, wow, these kids are legally blind and legally deaf, and they were taking these signs and generalizing. So I became very interested in communication, social communication. So have spent my career kind of focused on those two areas, but again, with young children. Any of you work at the Illinois Deafblind at Philip Rock Center? Oh, yes. Yeah, nice. I'll have to talk to you later. I doubt anyone I ever worked with is still there, but yeah, I had a great experience working there. Okay, so as Sherry said, kind of the overview, we will have breaks. I'm a pretty laid-back presenter in that if you have to get up and go to the restroom or go get more coffee, it does not bother me one bit. So feel free, get up, get what you need. If you have questions, I told our interpreters, if you guys need me to slow down, sometimes I talk pretty quickly, just tell me and I'm happy to slow down. I use my hands a lot. Oh, you want me to slow? Oh, the mic. Okay, Brett's cueing me in too. So I'm hooked up on a mic only for the audio or the video part. If we have some people do share outs, we need to use the mic. I'll try to remember to repeat what you say if it's just give me some suggestions. Otherwise, we need to use the mic so that we can capture it on the video. All right? You guys in the back, if I'm not loud enough, tell me, and I'll try to talk louder. Okay? So that's our plan for today. Pretty flexible. Yell if you have a question, raise your hand, yell it out. I'm not bothered by that kind of stuff at all. At the University of Illinois, right now I'm the department head. And so I teach, normally I teach early childhood special education courses. So courses around curriculum and methods or assessment for students who are going to be teachers in grade 3 and under. Right now I'm department head, so I'm spending a lot of my time going to meetings, and some of you are not, and you know what it's like to be in administration, so it's a different lifestyle. So I'm happy to be able to think about some of the work I've been involved in for the last several years and be able to share some of that. Okay, so I want us to look at this slide for a second and start from the outside. Everybody knows kind of what we do, right? Like if I asked you, you know, what is it you do? What do you spend your day doing? You could kind of rattle off, I do this, I do that, I do this, right? For the most part, even though your days may change from time to time, you know what the what is. If I ask you how you do it, what are the actions you take to do that, you could probably give me a list of some of the things, the how you do that. Where some of us struggle is the why we do it. So when we really start thinking about our interactions with children and families, sometimes we need to step back and go, why? Why is it? What is it that underlies what we do, why we do what we do? Why is it we fall into using certain strategies with certain children? That's the why, okay? There's been a lot of research lately, or a lot of press about young children being expelled from early childhood programs, particularly African American boys being expelled, and that should cause people to say, why? Why are you, as the teacher, acting this way towards that child, expecting these kind of behaviors from that child, treating this child the way you are? So I'm going to have you kind of think about that why throughout the day. Why is it when you think about children, you came here because of challenging behavior and social emotional competence, the why behind what you do? Make sense? I want you to question, why is it I use these certain strategies? Why is it I engage in my interactions this way? All right, so kind of in an effort, for some of you it appears when you walked in, a lot of you know each other, right? I don't know you. So we're not going to have you draw pictures because I didn't know how many of you would be here. But I do want you to talk for a minute with a peer, somebody near you, just for a second. What is it you want to take away from today? Okay, so talk for a minute to somebody around you. Why'd you come? I guess you have a choice to come, right? To these professional days, they're not required. Am I correct in assuming that? Okay, so the description that I saw on the website didn't give you a lot of information, right? So why are you here? What do you hope to get away from it? So talk to a friend. I'm going to give you a minute or two. Talk to somebody near you. If you're not near somebody, move over for a second. All right, let's hear some ideas of what are some things when you saw that big, detailed description about today that made you say, I need to sign up for that one, other than the fajita bar. What else? Because I'm getting that the fajita bar is a draw. Okay, so a couple people, if you just raise your hand, I'll kind of then repeat so we can all hear, but some people, some share of what did you hope to get from today? Somebody over here. Yes, thank you.
So I do the evaluations for our co-op, And I think any tricks that I can have while I'm evaluating a student who has possibly more than one thing going on is helpful for me to participate in the whole child as part of
Okay. All right, so evaluation ideas, thinking about the whole child, that even if, and that's a great point too, we could be doing an assessment on communication skills, but challenging behavior can interfere with that, right? We can be doing an assessment on motor skills, but challenging behavior. So any tricks or ideas that all of us can share. Okay, great, thank you, Tracy. Somebody else? Yes?
I'm in my 6th year of itinerant teaching, and I haven't really had a lot of behavior problems because it's like one-on-one, 30 minutes at a time. So it's been a long time since I've taken like any kind of behavior management kind of classes. So I feel like if I did get a kid who came in with behavior concerns, I wouldn't know what to do.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a refresher, give me ideas for if ever the situation comes up.
Okay, wow, how many people are going, lucky you, Elizabeth, 6 years. But you're right, but sometimes, and we'll talk about that, as an itinerant, you have different relationships, right, than a classroom teacher who might have 15, 20, or more. Okay, so great. So kind of a refresher, and what are some behavior ideas? Thank you. How about one more this side, one more this side? Who? Oh, brave soul. Thanks, Krista.
I have a very small classroom, but I tend to have kids, seems like every year there's at least one who's got behaviors that are, you know, they've not been so huge that I'm able to deal with them, but I find that when I kind of get to that why they're behaving, and I'm able to make that relationship with the kid a little bit better because I'm separating the personal, like it's not about me, it's about what's going on with the child, and so how can I address why he's acting that way or why she's acting that way, and then I find that my relationship with the child is better.
Okay.
So kind of just learning more about how to figure out the basis of the behavior.
Okay, so, right, so kind of thinking through, why is a child acting? And I think one other piece, which you alluded to, though you didn't quite say it, is why are you then reacting the way you are? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And I do remember when I worked at at the deafblind school, we had a behavior specialist from the state, and I remember I had a child who sent many of my teaching assistants to the hospital because of his super aggressive behavior, a young child. And she said to me, he's not doing this personally. This is not a personal attack on any of you. He can't communicate. He's struggling. He doesn't have the signs. He doesn't have the ability right now to communicate, and this is clearly working. So I think it's a good point, and we'll go over that several times today. So absolutely, so we hope we give you some ideas. All right, over here, yes?
We have a lot of students. I'm semi-retired. I oversee a vision itinerant teachers, and so many of our students that they don't accept their visual impairment yet, and then they act out. And so there's that lack of acceptance, and that's one of the reasons.
Okay, so kind of a self-esteem and identity of who am I, and so therefore there might be challenging behavior associated with that. Okay, great. All right, good. Well, I hope, I'm not giving you all the answers to these. I hope as we as a group too can process and think through as we think about how do some of the things I talk about apply to the person who's an itinerant versus a classroom teacher, the person who's working with teenagers versus working with younger children, etc. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about what we call the pyramid model, and this is a conceptual framework that is based on evidence-based strategies that a group of us developed. We've been working on it probably now for 15 years through grant funding in early childhood. You've seen lots of pyramids, right? I think Rob Horner and his group has come here at some point, George Sagai or Rob or some of them talking about PBIS. Similar kind of idea of a multi-tiered system of support. So kind of popular in the research literature that we talk about, we have to individualize things. Not everything fits for all children, but we have to have some things in place, and I'll talk about the bottom of the pyramid. Otherwise, we jump to the top of the pyramid prematurely. So let's talk about, first of all, we need an effective workforce. That's all of you. So we need people who are well-trained, who have professional development, who feel like they have the skills in challenging behavior, or if they're teaching vision in vision, or if they're teaching early childhood vision in early childhood and vision. So whatever it is, the content area, we have an effective workforce that is well supported. Because we know too, when we talk about children with challenging behavior, how does it make the adults feel? right? It's exhausting, it's super stressful. So we need to have the supports in place too for the workforce so people feel like they have the supports they need, they have the training they need, they have access to the resources they need. Then we have two tiers that are more universal, they're promotion strategies. So we want to promote social emotional competence so that we can prevent challenging behavior. So these are strategies, and we're going to talk about this tier and this tier today. These are strategies that if you have them in place, about 80% of the children in your class will do well and not engage in challenging behavior. So if you have nurturing and responsive relationships, and I'm glad you mentioned that earlier, Krista, because sometimes the children with challenging behavior are the hardest ones for us to connect with, right? So we're going to talk about the relationships. If you have environments, and that environment can be a one-on-one environment, it could be a home environment, it could be a classroom environment with 23 kids in it. But whatever the environment is, if you have high-quality environments, and those are in place, that should, for about 80% of children, that should keep them engaged and less likely to engage in challenging behavior. So we'll talk about those things. Then the next tier up is called it's for prevention. It's the secondary level. So if you think universal, secondary, and then tertiary. The secondary level is for about 15% of children who don't have some skills. And so you need to do some, provide some support or some training. So think about the child who doesn't know how to enter into an ongoing play situation, and so he doesn't have those play skills. So you need to do some targeted teaching about those skills. Or he doesn't have certain communication skills, or he doesn't know how to handle conflict. That's about 15% of children that you would then provide that, and it can be, you could do that as large group, you could do it as small group, you can do it one-on-one. So we'll talk some about that. Then the top of the pyramid is intervention for roughly 5% of children who, when all of this stuff is in place, continue to engage in persistent, challenging behavior. Now, what we as teachers do sometimes is we want to jump up to the top of the pyramid and go, that's my kids. I got to know what to do there. We call it intensive interventions because it's intensive for the adults too. It's a team-based approach. It means doing like functional behavior assessments on children. It's time-consuming. If we can get this stuff in place, we don't have to jump up to the top of the pyramid. So why would we do that? Why would we develop a full-blown, really intensive intervention if, in fact, by working on relationships with children or looking really critically at our environment or really thinking about what skills does this child need more support in, we don't have to go there. So we, the pyramid model folks, we are really strong proponents of you got to have these things in place. Otherwise, you're going to jump up to the top and spend a lot of time doing intensive interventions that could have been resolved by stepping back and being a critical evaluator of your own environment or the relationships you have with children. Does it make sense conceptually? Anybody want to argue with me that that's not how it should be done? I'm drinking decaf, but I can still put up a fight. All right. So you're going to see that model. We're going to I'll bring it up multiple times. And even though it was developed in an early childhood context, it has application, I believe, for all children. And similar to Horner's PBS, it's the same kind of ideas. I'm going to go more particularly into some of the strategies we use, though. Okay. So just to give you some background about the origin of where the model came from, it emerged from a national center. You have these websites on your handout, correct? They have, so anybody work with children, who works with children grade 3 and under in here? Anybody? Oh, yay. So I do have some early childhood people. But any of you, you can go onto these websites. If you're a grad student taking some classes, there are synthesis on here you can read. There's resources, but there are a lot of free resources on here. And if we have time later, I can actually pull up the website if we can get, oh yeah, I know we can get into it because Lisa posted the Wi-Fi password. At the end, we can go onto the website and I can show you some things that are free, that you can download, that you can tailor-made or individualize to your particular audience. So we had CEFL, the Social Emotional Center, which was funded by Child Care and Head Start. Then we also had a center that was funded by the Office of Special Ed Programs. These two grants worked together. When those two grants, when the funding, they were both federally funded. When the funding ended, we all decided, well, we didn't want this work to go away because we were doing a lot of work across the US. There are a lot of states that have really bought into this and have really focused on providing, strengthening social emotional competence in their early childhood programs. So we developed a consortium called the Pyramid Consortium, and I gave you the website there too, where you can again go and access between the three websites a lot of free materials. Have any of you gone to any trainings on CEFL, on the Social Emotional Grant, or TAXI, or the Pyramid Consortium? Anybody gone to any of those? Okay, I'll just alert the early childhood people, or those of you who are interested in early childhood. In April, we have a big conference in Tampa. Nice place to go if you live in Chicago in April. And it's all focused on the pyramid model and social emotional. And I can find you the website later, but it's called National Training Institute, and it's in Tampa, NTI. I should have put a link into it, but if you can't find it, tell me. But if you look up National Training Institute, Tampa, Florida, in April, you'll find it. And it is wonderful because it's a small conference, all geared towards social, emotional, challenging behavior in young children. All right, so what about this pyramid model? What is kind of some underlying ideas or principles about it? It's a public health model, so it came out of public health of doing promotion, prevention first, and then doing intervention. So, think about public health and how we talk to people about like hand washing so you don't get the flu. So we're doing some promotion stuff. Prevention, okay, get a shot so that you can prevent yourself from getting a flu. Okay, then you get the flu, well then we might have to put you in the hospital if you're 80 years old and now you're dehydrated and you have all kind of health issues. So it's that kind of model. Promotion, prevention, intervention, it's to promote the development of all children. So we really look at inclusive classrooms, because we know it's not just children with disabilities who engage in challenging behavior, correct? A lot of typically developing children act out too. So they may not have a diagnosis, but they're acting out because they don't have the communication skills, or the environment isn't responsive to them, or they need more than the relationships that they have established right now. So it's not just for children with disabilities. And it's got it provides a conceptual framework that's got a comprehensive array of interventions and approaches, so lots of different ideas. Okay, so what do we believe about behavior? Behavior is learned, right? Therefore, new behavior can be learned, correct? So think, how many of you are parents? Okay, decent amount of you. So think about your own children, right? Some of the behavior they engage in, it's learned, and we have to think about new ways to teach new behaviors, or that new behaviors can be learned. Behavior has a function. So what does that mean? That it has a purpose. So behavior is trying to tell us something. If you start yawning, and I notice that, or you start fidgeting around, it's 2:25 and you're starting to pack up, I get the cue, right? It's time to go, the day's over, okay? It's got a purpose, it's got a function. Behavior is part of a larger environment and events. So a child, a youth, a high schooler who might not typically engage in challenging behavior because of something that's gone on in the environment at home, or he comes in that classroom and he has a substitute and things are different than how they normally are, that environment can impact the way we act, right? If you came in here and there was no coffee and you thought there was going to be coffee, it was freezing, there was no interpreter, people could be upset, right? Our environment could be impacted. We could be impacted because of things that go on in the environment. And then behavior is quantifiable, and therefore it can be systematically examined. So we can take data on how long a behavior lasts, how many times a behavior occurs, the intensity of a behavior, who it occurs with. So we can take data on it to try to figure out, first of all, in what context, when is it happening, but also when we try interventions to see, are the interventions working, so that we can assess it and make sure it's really working. Okay. So what are strategies that the research shows that teachers commonly use in classrooms when children engage in challenging behavior? Often they give verbal warnings. Stop doing that. You know, don't, or, and it really, even parents, I hear this a lot. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Verbal warnings, disapproval, punishment procedures. I'm going to take something away from you. You're going to lose privileges. They might say, I'm going to contact your parents. I'm going to call mom and dad. I'm going to call grandma. They might remove the child. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is what we're seeing a lot in the early childhood literature right now, that people are really screaming about, that this has gotten ridiculous, how bad it is that preschoolers and children in childcare are being expelled from childcare at a higher rate than children are being expelled in kindergarten through grade 12. It's ridiculous. And can you imagine as a parent that you have your child in a child care center on a Monday and they call you and say, as of Wednesday, he no longer has a placement here because of his challenging behavior that we can't control. So children are being removed. And as adults, we sometimes inadvertently reinforce the challenging behavior. So child starts to whine, we don't want to hear it, so we're reinforcing that. I was at church yesterday, and my son and I went to the kids service, which is always really interesting for me because I just want to watch everybody. And I had a dad behind me with two boys, and they were, it reminded me of myself when my son was little, where I used to say, this church hour is the longest hour of the entire week, trying to keep a child quiet in a service. And at one point, the dad was holding the two of them. The kids were fighting, and he was kind of holding them on either side in the pew. And the one boy starts kind of screaming loudly, stop it, you're hurting me, let go of me, let go of me. Well, of course, the dad's totally embarrassed, right? So he lets go of him because people are starting to turn around going, what's happening? So we inadvertently sometimes reinforce those behaviors that are occurring. And what are some keys to a well-managed or well-run classroom? And we'll talk about these throughout too, but things like tone, positive tone, using prevention strategies, being consistent. So sometimes we're not consistent at all, and that can be really hard and give mixed messages to children. Have clear expectations. We'll talk about these. Give children choices. So how many of you that are parents or that have worked with little children, when kids are little, you know it's time to say go to bed. They're going to put on their pajamas. But you know, at least if I give them a choice, you want the red pajamas or the blue pajamas, they're going to get the pajamas on, right? But it's not a choice of you're not wearing pajamas, you're sleeping in your clothes. So giving choices. Choosing battles wisely. And then know and share your non-negotiables with students. So, and I think this is particularly true as children get older. What's non-negotiable for you in this classroom? My son will talk about classrooms where it's, you know, classes in his school as a high schooler where it's okay to have your phone out. Some teachers don't care. Other classrooms, that's a non-negotiable. You can't have your phone out. So knowing for yourself too, what's your non-negotiable? If you don't have some slides that you need from me, tell me later. I'm happy to like send you the ones if you tell me what you're missing, and my email's on the back. So I don't want you to feel like you have to take a ton of notes. Huh. Now what happened there? Okay, I'm not sure. Huh, I don't know why that's froze for a second. All right, so let's see if this works. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about promoting, building relationships with children. And those can be building or strengthening relationships. And also we're going to talk about creating supportive environments. So I'll kind of go through talking about with children, and you can say children, youth, young adults, whatever phrase. Talking about with families, teams, and then we'll talk about environments. And under environments, we'll talk about transitions and schedules and routines, expectations, and then kind of giving those positives, the reinforcement to children. And so where we are in here, we're going to now talk about this part of the pyramid model. And what we want to do, what the goal is of the pyramid model is really to create success for every child. We want every child to feel good in the environment. And we want to create environments that promote children being engaged. So we want them to be active and be engaged in the environment. And we want to focus on teaching children what to do. Okay, so what are the expectations in our environment? What are the skills that children can use in place of the challenging behavior? So a child engages in challenging behavior, we have to think about what's the function, what's that child trying to tell me, and so then what skills can we use in place of that? So what are some of the skills that we talk about children needing when they go to school? And here's a list of ones, and really it's school and beyond, and some of you mentioned some of these when you were talking about even what you wanted to get. So when you mentioned like confidence, the child who is struggling himself with having a visual impairment, or some children that you might work with, or having a hearing impairment or being deaf, things like confidence, being able to solve problems. These are all the skills that, or some of the skills that children need to be successful. So what happens when they don't have those skills? What do you see? Anybody? What do you? Low self-esteem. Okay. What else? Yeah.
Well, when they don't have good relationships or they don't know how to develop good relationships, sometimes they seek negative attention because they don't know how to get it positively.
Right. So if they don't have good relationships with others, they may try to get the attention in a different way, in a not very appropriate way, right? Because at least you're attending to me when I throw something, because you didn't attend to me when I was behaving appropriately. Others, what other things? Yeah.
They're really dependent on adult assistants in the classroom because they don't have peer relationships and they don't know what to do next.
Right. So children who aren't able to interact, don't have these good relationships with peers, like I talked about the children I used to work with, then they become more dependent on the adults to either facilitate those relationships, to help them handle conflicts, whatever. They become really dependent on the adults in the environment. Okay. So when children don't have those skills, they can engage in challenging behavior, or even we might say behavior that's like developmentally young for them. So kind of your example, Jill, it may not be that it's really a challenging behavior, but it's not where they should be developmentally if they're constantly coming to the adult. And it can be challenging to you if you have 4 and 5 children constantly saying, Miss So-and-so, Miss Jill, I need help, because they're not relying on their peers. Okay. So when we think about what is a challenging behavior, I'm really thinking about behavior that interferes with a student's learning or the learning of others. So you can think about children who it interferes with the learning of others in the classroom, right? Not just them or in the setting. It hinders positive social relationships and interactions, or the extreme, it can harm the student, the peer, family members, others. So we've heard, horror stories, as I'm sure you probably know, of families who will say, I can't leave my child alone with a sibling. Or we don't want to go out in public because of things that happen in public, and it ruins it for everybody, right? It ruins it for the whole family. So it's those extreme kind of behaviors that can really then cause families or cause classrooms to really be in chaos because of that. Okay, so I want you to help me finish the end of this kind of poem or sentence. If a child doesn't know how to read, we. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we. Ideally, we teach, but what do you see? Punish, right? A lot of times we punish. And so we don't finish that last sentence as automatically as the others, but what I want you to think about today is rethinking this. Thinking about this, the why do you do what you do. So if you are now thinking about some of the children you work with, and you get to this part and you think, usually I am punishing in some way, whatever that is, taking away privileges, saying something negative, whatever. Why? Why am I doing it that way? Go back to that initial graphic we looked at. And what could I be doing differently? What skills might that child need? What might I be able to teach? You with me? All right. Okay. So what are some basic assumptions about challenging behavior? Challenging behavior usually has a message. I'm bored. I'm sad. You hurt my feelings. I need some attention. Okay? Children often use challenging behavior when they don't have the social or the communication skills that they need to engage in more appropriate behaviors. So if they don't have those skills, then they often engage in challenging behavior. Behavior that persists over time is usually working for a child. So you get a child in your classroom and he appears to be quite a whiner. Guess what? That's worked for him. And sometimes that's worked for him for 10 years, 15 years. It's not going to change real easily, right? So think about that too. It works. So in some ways, wow, he's figured out this works really well. And so you have to figure out where are you in that equation and how can you change that behavior. And we need to focus on teaching children the skills that they can use in place of the challenging behavior. And we'll often talk about in the behavior literature and when we think about challenging behavior, efficiency and effectiveness. So if a child can hit a peer and grab a toy, that might be pretty, or pinch a child when she's not looking, or no, the teacher's not looking, and get a toy from that child, that challenging behavior is pretty effective and pretty efficient for the child, right? So if we try to teach that child something super complex in order to get that toy, this other behavior is more efficient and effective. So at least initially, we have to try to teach something pretty simple that will result in the same response. So the child can get access to some toys till the child learns a new replacement skill, okay? And then we can broaden it and make it bigger, make it more complex. But if we're going to try to teach like that, maybe we want the child to learn some signs, and we want to teach the child a 5-word sign or phrase in order to gain access to something more to eat, something more to drink, something to play with. Whereas maybe we start by simply signing cookie or something simple, and that's going to be more efficient and effective. So we try to think about efficiency and effectiveness when we're talking about teaching replacement skills, especially skills that have persisted over a long period of time. Otherwise, the child will revert and keep using the most challenging behavior. All right? Yeah.
I find this to be, when I go into homes in particular, the teachers typically will know to start teaching the replacement behavior, but the parents haven't been taught that instead of being a frustrating moment, it's a teaching moment.
Absolutely.
And so over and over again, they're kind of like, oh, I get you now. And they can refocus and start teaching. So sometimes sharing that with the parents is very helpful.
Right. So that's a great point. So those of you that are you should be interacting with families, especially to try to make sure skills that children are learning, be it at school, at home, or if you're doing home visits, so that there's communication across the environments. But I think talking to parents about, that challenging behavior is working for that child. It's happened or it's persisted over long periods of time. Okay, let's think about what else can we do, and let's try to be really efficient and effective. Make sense to everybody? Okay, so let's now start at the bottom of the pyramid now that we've kind of got some of the conceptual of the where are we going, are we all on the same page with what we're thinking? Why are building relationships important? So I want you to think about the children that really challenge you the most, okay? So relationships we build with children, with families, and with colleagues are the foundation of everything we do. And it's important that to build these relationships early on, not waiting until we have a problem, right? So how many times have we heard from families, like, I dread answering the phone call because I know they're going to call and tell me that my child has done something bad, because that's the only time they call. They only call when something's gone wrong. So we want to build relationships early on so that that's not happening, that we have some positive relationships, that we've shared some good things that the child has done also. Children learn in the context of relationships that are responsive, that are consistent, and that are nurturing. So Krista, I think you mentioned earlier about the relationships with children. And I know when I taught, particularly this child that I mentioned who had sent some of my teaching assistants to the hospital, when he was kind of quiet and engaged by himself, we were most likely to leave him alone. because it was like, whoo, things were kind of peaceful. But really, we should have been working on developing a relationship with him, engaging with him around those things he enjoyed, around the positive things, rather than once he pulled someone's hair or bit something or bit someone or threw something at someone, that's when we then engaged. Because we were, in essence, reinforcing or teaching him, do these negatives and you'll get the adult attention. They'll come running over. So I think that sometimes is what kind of patterns we get ourselves into. And children with the most challenging behaviors especially, they need the relationships. So have you ever in your head thought, those of you that are classroom teachers, oh good, Cameron's not here today. It's going to be a better day, right? And we've probably all been there, right? And yet that's the kid who really needs us to say, I'm so glad you're at school today. I missed you yesterday, right? That child may be the one who's really crying out for, I need someone to care. I need someone to be happy to see me. I need someone to ask me about my night or play with me or engage with me in some way. And even if we, think as kids get older that adults' time and attention isn't important to them, it is. And so we need to be sure that we're giving them that, our time and attention, at times other than when they're engaging in challenging behavior, all right? And parents and other colleagues are critical partners in building children's social and emotional competence. So mental health providers, behavior specialists. How many of you are in this room are behavior specialists who actually go in or are called upon to go in when there's a challenging behavior? A couple of you? Yeah? Some of you don't want to admit it. You don't want anyone to know. So some of you are the people right the front line where they're calling you and saying, I need help, right? Yeah. Okay. So what are relationships? What's the flip side or the benefit for kids? They help children feel accepted, right? When children have positive relationships with peers, with adults, they feel accepted in that environment. They help children learn to communicate and get along with others. So there are a lot of learning opportunities that occur through peer relationships and relationships with adults. They encourage feelings of empathy and respect, mutual respect, and we'll talk about empathy and emotional literacy later. And they provide a supportive environment in which all children can learn and can practice the behaviors that we want them to engage in, those appropriate behaviors. They can practice them as individuals and as a group. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a minute. And what I want you to do is you should have a piece of paper like this. Okay, put it sideways like this. Take a row, the top row of 3 behaviors, and I want you to independently for a minute, think about those children who are really challenging to you, and I want you to jot down 1 in each of the 3 circles, 3 behaviors, 1 in each, that really push your buttons. What are the behaviors when that child you came here thinking about or that child you've been thinking about now for the last half hour, 45 minutes, what are those behaviors? Jot them down. Okay, once you've jotted down 3, talk to a peer or someone around you about what those behaviors are. Talk about how those behaviors make you feel. What's your response when you typically see those behaviors? And does it, and if so, how does it impact your relationship with the child, with the family? So talk to each other, turn around if you're in a space by yourself. Talk to each other for a couple minutes about those behaviors. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple of you to share and tell us just give us 1 of your behaviors. Tell us how did it make you feel, what's your response, just kind of summarize, and then about your relationships. So who's going to be a brave soul? And I'm going to give you the microphone, which we can't hear in here, but it's for the audio, for the taping. So who's going to be a brave soul? Yes. Thank you, Gina. Yes. Okay.
Hi. I have a student that the only response she will give me is, I don't know. And I've been working with her for 3 years, and she just, like this, gives me nothing. I don't know. And she's a straight A student, so she does know. But it's really, really, really frustrating because I honestly don't know how to get through to her.
Okay. So it makes you feel frustrated. What's your response? So what do you do? Right now, what are you doing?
You know, we just, a lot of our sessions are spent just talking. I'm trying to, get on her level and talk to her about, her friendships and things like that, social media, things she's interested in.
Okay.
And sometimes that does work, but when we go back to her hearing loss and anything like that, she doesn't want any part of it, doesn't want to admit to it.
Uh-huh.
So.
And
that's
so
her.
most of the conversations you're having with her where she says, I don't know, are about her hearing loss?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe getting kind of personal?
Right. I mean, and it's been 3 years, and I mean, we do know each other like on a personal level. Like like I said, she'll open up about that. But when it comes to the reason I'm there with her,
Right.
I can't really get anywhere
Yeah.
with her.
So how does it impact your relationship then with her?
I start over each week with a new attitude, and I, try to be extra nice to her and make her enjoy our sessions together. But I do, by the end, I'm usually pretty frustrated, and I think she can see that. Last week I was like, this wasn't a good session, was it? And she was like, no. So,
Okay. Yeah.
so my frustration came out. And,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
then I think about it all week, like, I probably should have handled that differently, so.
And well, you're thinking through, like, what can I do different? How
Yeah.
can I handle it next time? Okay, good. Thanks for sharing that. We'll come back to it. Somebody else? Thank you. So tell us what your behavior was that pushed your button, and how did it make you feel, and yeah.
A problem that I've had is that if one of my students gets upset or discouraged and doesn't think he can do something, that he'll shut down and take his cochlears off, put his head on his desk. And that makes me feel kind of panicky. I had in the past, because then there's no way to communicate with him. And I always think, like, what if something happened in that moment? Like, if we happened to have a fire drill or something, then he would, how would I even get him out of the building? Because he's just not responding in that moment. So now I try to be more patient and give him a minute to come back, or like things that will maybe help him to know that he can do the lesson. But it is hard, because you do have to just accept that for those couple of minutes he's not going to have any communication, and he's not like getting anything that you're saying. So and I think that impacts the relationship with a child for sure, because needs to know that he is in a safe place, and that he's and it's not, I'm not going to be like mad because he's upset, because that is not helpful. But then you try to talk to the parents about it, and then oftentimes we have parents that don't really sign, so they're not really communicating with their child, so it's difficult.
Sure. And are you going into your interactions with him kind of waiting, like the hair on the back of your neck, like, when is this going to happen?
For sure.
Okay.
On eggshells.
Yeah. So I think that's another thing too, when you think about, the behavior that pushes your button, and how does it make you feel, that sometimes you're almost walking into those interactions anticipating what's going to happen next, or when is this thing going to happen? Okay, how about one more? Oh, thank you.
I have actually a good story to tell. On Friday, I had a kid actually, tattling is one of my, like, I don't even know the words. That's just how it makes me feel. So on Friday, I had a kid come up to me, and we've been working on, when they come up with tattle, like talking to your friend, well, then all they do is just go to each other and stop. And it's like, they're not doing anything to you right now. Like, you need to tell them what you don't want them doing. Like, don't touch me, don't push me, don't whatever. So just building their language and, just helping them communicate more effectively. But on Friday, I had a kid come up to me at recess, and he said, I need some help, please. And I was like, awesome, like, what do you need? And he's like, this kid pushed me. And I said, did you try to talk to him? Yeah, I told him, don't push me. But he did it again. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So it's good. Every once in a while, you have one of those where it like starts sinking in, and it starts working, and they'll tell each other still, they'll be like, stop touching me, or whatever. So like, slowly it's starting to work.
So nice to see the behaviors that are driving you crazy. You're starting to now see some changes. Okay, good. All right. So we're going to we're going to come back to those in a couple minutes. But let me give you some ideas for when you feel frustrated, when you feel anxious, when you feel like you're on eggshells. So I don't know if you can tell these are different colors, but like green goes with green. So you might be thinking, that child is a monster. This is getting ridiculous. He'll never change. You ever thought like that? So then you might say, this child is testing to see where the limits are. My job is to stay calm and help him learn better ways to behave. Okay? This one, I'm sick of putting out fires. Who's ever felt that way? Yeah? You might say, I can handle this. I'm in control. They've just learned some powerful ways to get control. I'll teach them some more appropriate ways to behave. Okay? Or you might say, maybe when you walked in today, I wonder if the Holiday Inn is hiring. Not sure, we could ask. But instead, you might think or say, I feel undervalued right now. I need to seek support from my friends. You got a lot here, right? My peers and my supervisor. So sometimes you might need to go above, right? Like, I really need more supports than what's here. Don't start working, don't bail on us. Sherry will be upset with me if you all start applying to Holiday Inn. Okay, you might say or think, he ruins everything. This is going to be the worst year of my career. But you might reframe it or rethink, having him in my life is going to be a wonderful professional development experience. Yes? All right. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take those hot buttons and now go to the bottom row. And I want you to reread it and consider how you might reframe it. So for example, you might have said whining. This child, it used to drive me crazy when my son would whine. He's whining so much, and they might have said at school too, like, oh my gosh, he's whining and whining. But it might be reframed as he really misses his mom right now. He really is sad. His mom's out of town in Tinley Park for the night, and he really misses her. So maybe I'll see if he has a picture, or we could read a story together so that he won't be whining. I don't want you to think about what the strategy is, but I want you to think about how to reframe it, like why? What might be the function? Why might that child be engaging in the whining? Or maybe it's a child who's non-compliant, like you put, it drives me crazy, it pushes my buttons when kids are non-compliant. You might reframe that as, wow, this child is really strong-willed. He's going to go far in life because he has such strong ideas, right? All right, so I want you to, don't come up with strategies like how I'm going to teach it or whatever. I want you to just reframe it. So look at this 3 that you came up with, go to the next row, reframe them, and then talk to your partners about how you reframed them. And if you need help, you can talk to each other and brainstorm how to reframe them, either way. Okay, let's get a couple examples. So someone tell us, let's get a couple examples and then we'll take a break. This is between you and the break for more coffee if you need it. Tell us what your hot button was. Tell us how you would consider reframing it. So you want to tell us something like, how could you think about it differently? So what do you think the purpose of it is or the function of it? How would you look at it differently? So let's get 3 examples and then we'll take a break. Yes, I'm going to give you the mic. Can you pass that down to her? Okay, thank you.
Maybe because Becca wants me to read it. So my hot button was that this student likes to invade personal space.
Huh?
So he likes to look at what's on your laptop. And he likes to be very close to you when you're trying to do something. So we reframed it as, this student must be very curious and inquisitive.
Excellent. Okay, so see how you could look at it as a positive? Then you can move down the road later and figure out what can I teach about staying out of my personal space and not being so close. But you're kind of reframing it as, why might he be doing that? Excellent. 2 more. Yes.
Being interrupted constantly So I reframed that to, I am fortunate that they have so much to contribute during my lesson.
Absolutely. Your lessons are so good. They
So
want to-
engaging,
Exactly.
they cannot even help themselves.
But it helps you, right? Doesn't that help you think about it differently if you can reframe it into a positive? Like, what is it? Then you can work with, how do I teach them not to interrupt? But at least then you can look at it as, they're so enthusiastic. They can't wait to talk about puppies or space or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, one more. Yes.
All right, I had an aha moment on the whining. This child knows how to use their voice rather than being physical to get attention.
Okay, there we go. So it's a step, right? Could be hitting, could be, but at least we're a step closer. All right, excellent. Anybody else anxious to share? Or are you ready for coffee? Ready for a break? Okay, 15-minute break. So take a break. Bathrooms are to the left, and then we'll come back and keep going. Well, first of all, let me just say I love going into the bathroom and hearing people continue the conversations in the stalls and talking from one to another about how they're problem solving with the students they're working with. So I love that. I said to the ladies who were in the restroom, sometimes you go to these one-shot workshops, and we know in the professional development literature, one-day workshops are not going to drastically change your behavior, right? But I always feel like if you can get one or two new ideas, if you can look at something a little bit different when you go into work tomorrow, it will hopefully have been worth your time. And we'll all walk away going, okay, a couple light bulbs went off, a couple ideas. So I hope you'll jot down as some ideas or some light bulbs go off, some things you want to revisit tomorrow when you get home and go back to your classroom or whatever your job, wherever your job takes you, and have some of those new ideas really come to fruition. All right, so I want you to look at this for a second. This is a study that was published in 0 to 3 in 2000. And what it really encourages us to look at is the impact of culture on developmental expectations for children, which impacts our expectations around behavior. So pay attention. So this was a study where they looked at Caucasian moms, Puerto Rican moms, and Filipino moms, and had them asked the moms when they expected their child to achieve these developmental milestones. So these milestones listed here are all things that we would expect to babies. So this is an early childhood study to develop by the time they're around 38 months, 3 years old or so. So then if you look across, it shows what the Caucasian, then the Puerto Rican, then the Filipino moms said their expectations were for when they thought babies should develop those skills. Any of the ones that have an asterisk over here in the last column, those are the ones where the differences were significant across the three groups. So they were stark differences or pretty pronounced differences. So look at, there's the three of them I want to just call your attention to. Look at utensils, which is right here, across. And you'll see that Caucasian moms in this study expected babies to use utensils at 17.7 months. Puerto Rican moms at 26.5 months. Filipino moms at 32.4 months. So think about yourself if you were an early childhood teacher or a child care provider, and you're serving family style, or you're giving the baby a spoon. Why might you see some challenging behavior? Never seen it, right? Child's never used a spoon before, isn't expected to feed his or herself. Right? Might bang it, might throw it, might hit somebody with it. Okay, look at sleep by self, this one right here. Caucasian moms expected that at 13.8 months, the average. Puerto Rican moms, 14.6. Filipino moms, 38.8. So again, think of yourself. You're an early childhood provider. It's nap time. Guess what? That child's not going to lay down on that cot, or might not want to, or might need some more support, right? Because the Filipino child is not used to sleeping alone. Taking a nap by his or herself may not be used to. Finally, look at play alone. Caucasian moms expected that around 2 years of age, 25 months. Same with Puerto Rican moms, 24.8. Filipino moms, 12.3. Now, what the study they talk about in that one is that for some Filipino moms, the moms didn't play. They didn't see their role as moms as play partners. That was what the siblings did. But those kind of cultural differences mean when a child comes into your environment, and we can think about high school students, middle school students, because there's all kind of developmental milestones, right? Driving, being out late at night, having a girlfriend, doing your laundry. I'm thinking of all the things I'm arguing with my son about these days. Cutting your own apple up into slices rather than mom doing it. You know, there are different things. And being an only child versus having multiple kids, or being an only child after a rough pregnancy. You know, we might interact with our kids differently culturally. But those things, those cultural differences mean, again, a child is coming in with, and a family is coming into your setting with very different, potentially very different expectations than you might have, given how you were raised, what your background has been, what your culture is. Okay, let's look at one more. Here's one where they looked at, in this study, Farver and Lee Shin, also in 2000. Again, I'm pretty sure this was 0 to 3 also. Looked at Korean American moms and European American moms and some social kind of behaviors. So parents believe parents and children should play together. 96% of European American moms said yes. Korean American moms, only about half in this study. Prefer children play with sex-type toys. Boys play with trucks, etc. 71% of Korean parents, moms, 43% of Caucasian. Provide children with many chances to decide, so lots of choices. 66% of European American moms, 11% of Korean American moms. So again, why might these things impact behavioral expectations for children in your group, that you interact with? How could these behaviors influence children's behavior in your classroom? Or, yeah, Kristen.
Child hasn't ever been given very many chances to make their own choices, or they're constantly being told what to do, told what to do, told what to do. They might feel a lack of control and act out because of that.
Absolutely. So if a child hasn't had a lot of choices, they may struggle to even make a choice. So we used to do some, when I lived in Nashville, I was part of a group where we did some language research with kids. And when we started with preschoolers, we would talk to the teachers about, when you're trying to teach children initially about choices, try to give a really highly preferred choice, something you think is going to be high, and something that's more neutral. So if you give me the choice of a brownie and ice cream, I want both. But if you give me ice cream and a saltine, I'm picking the ice cream and I'm not going to get upset about it, right? So when children are learning choices early on, especially if your culture has meant or your family dynamics have meant you're not given many choices, help the child learn that when you make a choice, it means that's your choice. So help them learn that early on by choosing more preferred and less preferred, okay? So that it's not having to choose between the brownie and the ice cream, but it's the saltine and the ice cream. So for most of us, that's an easier choice. Anybody here pick the saltine? Are you serious? Some people don't like ice cream or like saltines. Okay, yes?
Would you recommend that if you're trying to give a child choices to, like you want them to, take a break or use some type of calming strategy rather than engaging behavior, pairing it again with something less? Like rather than saying, do you want to jump on the trampoline or go on the swing? Giving them something, at least initially, maybe less preferred.
Yes.
Getting them to say, we want you to choose a break rather than.
Right, so she's asking if you have a child who you're giving a break, right? Is it you're giving them a break, and again, you don't want to now escalate the challenging behavior by taking them to a sensory room and giving all these choices, right? That's really hard. So you might want to help narrow it down first. And the child maybe doesn't really like riding the bike that much, but he loves the tramp. So you want to give him some choices because you want to have him feel some control, right? That's some of it too, is feeling independence, feeling control. So again, starting with the something you think might be less preferred so that the choice is easier to make. Yeah, good question. Anybody else? Yeah.
Sometimes too, the children will want to put down as one of their calming techniques to play a video game, and then I always say, now, is that going to be hard for you to stop after 10 minutes? And then we decide maybe that's not one of the best choices.
Yeah. So you could ask them so you only have 10 minutes to do it. Which of these things is going to be easier for you in 10 minutes to stop? That, or what's the other choice? I don't know what would they have, read a book? I'm not sure. Yeah. So giving them the choices like that it can help you keep that problem behavior from either escalating or starting another problem behavior from arising. Yeah, we use these kind of strategies, the choice strategies, a lot with families like who struggle with bedtime routines. You don't have a choice of brushing your teeth in most families. You got to brush your teeth before you go to bed. But when you do it, that can be a choice. Do you want to put on your pajamas first and then brush your teeth, or brush your teeth first? The child has some control, but this is a non-negotiable thing. You're going to brush your teeth before you go to bed. So there are lots of places you can insert those, but the cultural piece is realizing that some children come to us in school or in our settings, and they really have had limited experience with that kind of thing. I think if you look at this one here too, you can imagine why if you put yourself in the frame of not all cultures or not all families think it's okay for boys to put on the princess dress. And you realize, you know what, it's not a judgment, it's just different cultures. So as long as you take it out and go, okay, this is that family, this is their value system, then you can understand why dad might come in and be upset because he saw pictures that you posted on the class website of his daughter in a dress. So you got to figure that out then with the family of, okay, so what are we going to do here? Okay. What did I do with my clicker? Oh, here it is. Okay, so I like this picture here. Some of you have seen these before in workshops maybe, the iceberg. So what does it tell you? Those of you that are shaking your head, you know it. So what?
What we see on the surface is a lot less than what's really underlying.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we see for any child, really anybody we interact with, right? We see a little bit of who that person is or what they bring to the situation. All the stuff down here, we don't see, we might not have knowledge of. It could be huge things like neglect, abuse, violence in a family, lack of food, limited resource families. But it could be some of those developmental expectations. I've never been given choices. My parents are very directive. I'm always told what to do. I'm not supposed to look at adults in the eye. Whatever those cultural pieces might be, it's all of this stuff down here. So we have to remember that and think we only have a piece of the picture. Remind ourselves we only have a piece of the picture, and there may be parts of that iceberg that we don't see and we don't know. And so trying to either gain information from partnering with the families or at least understanding ourselves that there's things we don't know that may come into play of why the child behaves or acts the way he or she does. Okay, I'm going to show you a little video, and I'm hoping that just by putting the microphone on it, you might be able to hear it. If not, I have a speaker that I could try to set up. I'm not very technologically skilled, so I have to figure out how to hook it up with Bluetooth. So let's try it this way, but I'm going to give you the context. So this is in a preschool setting, and this is from the CEFL, the Social Emotional website. So if you wanted to find it, you could go find it on there if you were using it in training or you were teaching a class and you wanted to find it. It's a teacher talking to a child during what would be called center time or free time in a pre-K classroom. So what I want you to pay attention to is watch the adult and pay attention to what you think are some of the things she's doing to build relationships with the children in her class, if this was typical to what she's doing with many children throughout the day, throughout the week. Make sense? Okay, so I have to turn the PowerPoint off for a sec, get the video. This is when being someone who, kind of started her career when computers were almost just coming out, I'm like, okay, most of my students are way more skilled than I am in doing this stuff.
I was thinking we could have a drama party or a slumber party.
Oh, that sounds like fun. I used to have those when I was little.
What?
Pajama parties.
You?
Yeah, we'd have pizza and stuff,
We used to have pizza. I had pizza at the center.
At the center?
Yep.
Is it from the pizza place or does the lady make it?
The lady make it. We was watching SpongeBob movie.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't see that. How is it?
Great. It's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Can you tell me about the story? Because I don't know anything about it, because I don't have little kids at home to watch this stuff. So you all have to tell me what's going on.
Well, I'll tell you about the stuff eating.
Okay, go
and
ahead.
toys.
What happened?
They are copying you by the house area and the block area and the computer and the writing area and the painting area and
We don't have art now, remember? That's our studio. Is that the after-school place you go to?
yeah, and they got sand
But
and they copying the doors we got
But whose is better, this class or the after-school?
this class.
Why?
Because I like it when Janelle was there and Rita and Miss Ellie.
Okay.
and Miss Elizabeth.
So what do you do there? What do you do there?
Well, I can tell you the stuff they got.
What do they got?
They got red, blue, green, and some more planks and bowls.
Yeah?
And the same cups.
Yeah. Oh, so they don't use paper when they eat? They have regular cups and stuff? Yeah.
For the house area.
Oh, they have the same ones as us?
Yup. They copying you with everything. And the other one computer work and the other computer work.
Well, that one computers. We're going to try to get it fixed. I'm going to ask, okay? Because it's hard to wait your turn, huh? Who's over there on the rug? That Miss Bella?
Miss Bella and Miss Elizabeth.
Oh. So, but you have a good time there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think, I don't think they're really copying us. I think they know what children like to play with. So they have the same stuff. What's your favorite thing there?
I'll tell you what's my favorite toy.
What's your favorite toy?
Play-Doh with my teacher, Miss Ellie.
Oh, what about the after school? What do you like there?
I like to play with Kelly and Claudia.
Oh, so you made new friends already?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's because you're a wonderful little girl, huh?
Mhm.
Have they been there for a long time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they helped you out with like the rules and stuff?
Yeah.
Or do they have the same rules as us?
Yup.
Same?
The old ones.
The old ones?
And they try to copy us with the brand new stuff too.
Yeah, but do you remember when we talked about if someone copying you, that means they must like what you're doing, so it's okay?
Yeah.
So they must think that we're really good here, huh? Yeah, you think so?
Okay. So talk to the person next to you or people near you for a minute and talk about what are some things this adult does to build a relationship with this child. Okay, let's share some ideas. What are some things that you noticed that this adult was doing to build relationships, if this was typical of kind of her engagement with children in her classroom? What are things she did with this little girl?
She made constant eye contact and was sitting near her and everything.
Right. So she's on the child's level, right? And she's making constant eye contact with her. All right. What else? Yes.
She kept asking for the child's opinion about different things.
Yeah. So kind of valuing her, right, as someone with her own ideas and thoughts. So she asked her opinions. What do you think about? Why do you think they do that? Yep. What else? Yes, in the back.
She could be a wonderful DCFS investigator.
Why do you say that? Why could she be a
DCFS.
Uh-huh.
So, but just because her questions were good with, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
What do you know about that? I don't know about that. You tell me about that.
Yeah.
And she also tracked well with when kiddo was a little bit distracted with something in the room. She acknowledged that, let her speak to that, and then brought her back to what they were talking about.
Yeah. So really, like what we call follow her lead, right? When she sees the little girl looking over at Miss Ellie or whoever's over there or the computer, she followed her lead over there, but ask kind of these probing questions. Yeah, good. How about in front? Leah? Or
at the beginning, she tried to relate to the student by sharing what she was interested in as well.
Yeah. So at the beginning, she shared about pizza party. I like a pizza party. But then she asked her too, right, for advice about SpongeBob. She didn't know what SpongeBob was, so asked her. So kind of shared stuff about herself as the adult as well as gathering information from the child. Yeah.
In most cases, she was very careful not to answer her own question.
Yeah. Like I feel like I'm doing when I repeat you guys. No. But yes, so she was really good about, she'd ask questions. And what about teaching? Did she teach something at some point? Yeah.
Well, we talked about that because we're always trying to, like, because we're like, okay, when we have a deaf or hard of hearing student, to have that much language and incidental learning is like, wow. So we were talking about, in order to build that relationship, don't make it too much of a teaching moment because then you kind of get focused on, oh, what vocabulary, let's talk about the sentence length, let's, you know, so kind of have to have a balance between that teachable moment versus not, oh, here she goes again.
Trying to insert vocabulary. So if that little, so help me and help others, if that little girl was deaf or hard of hearing and the teacher was signing to her, or that would be way too much. That's overload. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I saw she did do some of the repeating, like, oh, copying. Remember how we said copying is really a flattering, so they must like us.
Yes. So by the end, because the little girl kept saying, they're copying us. They have the same bowls as us. They're copying us. They have the same equipment as us. They're copying us. They do snack time the same way or whatever. And then she kind of finally brought it around and said, but remember what we talked about, which I could imagine that you had some challenging behavior that had gone on at some point that you're copying me. She's making the same thing I'm doing or saying the same words. So it could have been something that came up as a result of some challenging behavior, but trying to insert that teaching in there too. Yeah. Yeah.
I think she also did a good job in when you were just talking previous about, you know, the cultural background of the kiddo, that, you know, she goes to a center, or she could have been talking about a shelter. She lives in a shelter. She did a good job of getting that background information about what goes on outside of this classroom.
Yes, yes. So trying to understand the whole child, right? So figure out where she's spending her other parts of her day, what she's doing there. Yeah. Good. Any other comments? Yeah.
I think just her body language showed how, you know, interested she was and really giving value to what the girl was saying.
Yeah. So she's smiling, she's open, right? She laughed a little. She kind of pointed to herself at some point when the girl was saying how she liked these other teachers, and she's kind of like, what about me, right? What about Miss Ellie? So she brought that back. Okay. And, you know, sometimes when we show this video in our training, people will go, I never have that much time. I could never spend that much time with a child, especially if you have 15 children in your room. It's true. You could never spend that much time every day with every child. But it's like the little snippets, the little bits of time when you can have children. What are some of the things that jump when you can have that time with children, or even shorter amounts of time? It's the body language. It's the getting down on their level. It's following their lead. It's asking questions that are not test questions. What color is this? How big is this? But it's really genuinely engaging with a child. How about those of you, we'll flip for a sec since that was an early childhood example of adult-child conversations. How about those of you that are working with middle schoolers or high schoolers? Give us some ideas. So how do you engage them in conversations that don't feel like test questions and grilling them? What are you doing? Yeah.
It's about their interest. Like, oh, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Or if I know a student is in a sport, did you guys have a game this weekend? Did you win? I try to base it off of things that I know that they like, and then they just kind of give me feedback that leads to other things.
Yeah. So you've spent some time initially knowing they're in sports, or they like to go to the movies on the weekend, or they have a job at the Holiday Inn, or whatever, so that you could then ask those kind of questions and then checking in. What'd you do? How was your weekend? Yeah.
I say I'd like to interact too with my junior high and high school kids. Usually 3, sometimes 4 times a year, I see them as a group. So I pull them all together and I say, okay, here are your peers in your school. So it could be, you know, freshman through senior, or 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, depending on what the center is. And then I get a lot of information from that, just listening to them.
Oh.
So I say, okay, tell them about yourself. Like I take my veteran students, like, okay, you start, tell them about yourself, tell them about your hearing loss, tell them what your interests are, and go around.
And then do they engage with each other during that time too? So they're asking each other questions? Okay, so bringing the group together too, and plus how great is that? Then we recognize each other, if we don't already, but now we see each other, we know we have some shared interests. You like movies, I do. You work there, I work here. Okay, good. Yeah.
I do morning meeting every morning, and so the first thing we do is they group up with a partner, and then they have to greet each other in the morning, and they ask each other a question, and then we come back and they have to share each other's answer. And then so Mondays we do like a quick write, so I put a question on the board and they answer it on a post-it and put it up there, so we talk about everybody's answers. Then Tuesdays we do Tell Me Something Good Tuesday, and then I put it up, they write on a piece of paper and we put it up on our bulletin board. Wednesdays we do Would You Rather Wednesday, so like 3 Would You Rathers, and so then we talk about that and why they picked what they picked. And then Thursdays I do 2 quotes, and usually it's about kindness or making good decisions, and then we talk about what does it mean to you, or what do you think it means and why. And then Friday is like a free-for-all, so sometimes we'll play charades or we'll play a quick game or something like that. So, but it's a way to start out in the morning so that we just get to talk, or just get to just start the morning on a positive note.
And how old are the students you're working with? Middle school. And so when you do the post-it note or the ideas, like the Wednesdays, the Tuesdays, that they're sharing with each other as peers?
We do it as a group.
Okay.
So we're always, in the morning, the first part they connect with each other one-on-one, and then we come back to the group and share it.
Okay.
But then the other part, the second part of it, is we're all sharing as a group. So when we do like the Would You Rather, we just, I put the question up, and then I have a ball, and we throw the ball, and they get to throw it, so they're watching whoever is answering the question.
Okay, great. So great way for you to learn information about them as you're posing these questions, for them to learn information about each other and connect with each other. So yeah, great. Okay, they're important to think about ways you can build relationships with the children in your class, regardless of what age. If they're younger ones who might tell you everything about home life and things that have gone on in other settings, or it might be older ones who you feel like you're just pulling things out of them. So having some strategies that work to help them be engaged and engaged with you. Okay. So what the literature will talk about too is the importance of a 5-to-1 ratio, making sure when we're talking to children we're not being so negative and so directive. And so the negative and directive kind of go together, rather than always say, sit down, put your feet flat on the ground, put your eyes up here, put your crisscross applesauce, or whatever the directives are, that there should be 5 positives to every one directive. And I think if we audio tape ourselves or videotape ourselves, we might see that often we don't fit near within that, because we're constantly feel like we're barking out instructions to kids, or directions, or negatives. Stop doing that, stop doing that. So that's time for us to step back in our environment and in our relationships with children and see what's going on. How could I do this differently? How could I set the tone in my classroom or in my interactions with this child so it's not so many directives or so many negatives? And some of you are nodding your head like you've been there before. And any of us that are parents know we've been there before too. So we're with you as teachers or classroom people that believe you, us, we know we fall into this and have to bite our tongue at times and go, stop. My son and I used to have do-overs. Like, let's have a do-over. Let's start again, because this day is clearly going down the wrong path. So, kind of paying attention to those things. And giving attention when the child's engaged in appropriate things, rather than, oh, phew, take a deep breath, he's engaged in something appropriate, I'm not going to pay attention, but thinking about when you give some feedback, some descriptive feedback about, wow, you really were playing nicely with, or I saw how you were doing whatever. So these just give some ideas, and again, these are mostly, uh-oh, what happened there? Huh. These are mostly ideas from the early childhood literature and work we've done in early childhood, but I think some of them apply to older children, youth and young adults too. Things like greeting kids when they come in, saying hi, welcoming someone who's been gone for a while. following a child's lead. We talked about even with middle and high schoolers, finding out what they're interested in, acknowledging effort. You know, some things are really difficult, but you tried. So there's all kind of ideas there. In early childhood, we have done things to help build relationships where we might put photos of a family in the environment. It maybe they're posted near where kids rest. It may be, I've seen teachers like in 3rd grade or have pictures around the classroom where kids bring in a frame with a family picture. So you have something to engage and talk to them about. They can also go look at it should they be feeling lonely or sad or whatever. I don't know, well, you'll give me ideas, other ideas for middle school and adults. Other ways, when a child misses school, telling a child, we missed you, rather than thinking, oh, yay, Cameron's not here today. When Cameron comes back tomorrow saying, Cameron, we missed you yesterday. Were you sick? You know, what happened, bud? You weren't here. So that the child knows he was missed, rather than the deep breath of, whew, he's not here today. Okay. So how do you make deposits for children, particularly children who don't respond? So some kids, I mean, we've probably all been around children who they do not want to be singled out, right? They don't want to be the one who's called upon or acknowledged. So how do you respond to those? How about for children who have visual impairments or hearing impairments? How about children who have physical disabilities or medical concerns? So what are some ways, what ideas do you have that you could share with others for kind of groups that are maybe more hard to reach than what your colleagues may have, kind of more typical classrooms where they might not have some of these? What could be challenges? Yeah, I'm going to give you, Krista, the mic for him.
So I have a student who doesn't really like to talk about himself or his family or things like that, but he really likes the White Sox, and he knows I really like the Cubs. So a lot of our, even just like having that little rivalry almost, but in a positive way, and teasing each other.
Right.
But then one day it was funny because he came up to me, or we were talking about the Cubs and the Sox as the Cubs were in the playoffs, and he goes, but Mrs. Ohms, you like the Blackhawks, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, okay. He's like, and we both like the Bears, right? So he was like, like searching for like a connection there, because we disagree on this, but he was seeking out, which he is not a student to seek out that similar interests, but he kind of expressed to me like, we have some things in common, and
absolutely,
that was a really big step for him.
Okay, so finding that commonality, but even the healthy banter back and forth of like, he probably enjoys that, right? How'd your Cubbies do last night? How'd the White Sox do? My family's Yankee fans, so don't come near me with those Cubs. All right, who else? Yeah, wait, I'm going to pass you the mic. Can you pass that down, Dan? It's kind of weird to hold it because you can't hear anything out of it except for the audio. But
one thing that is a benefit for me is I'm an infant, so I teach high school and I'm almost the same age as most of the kids.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of the same interests, and they get to live vicariously through me sometimes. For example, I'm obsessed with haunted houses, and so are my kids, but most of the times they don't have like the ability to go or the resources. So I go and then I talk about it for like an hour. Same with like escape rooms. I do all these like fun things that they also find fun, and I explain it, and I'm like, guys, if you can plan this, do it, go. And then they ask about it, and I try to bring that to them. So it's a way for me to like bring it to them, and like we also have that relationship.
Excellent. So again, the connection. So finding a way. And your, like you said, your age may be a benefit for you or to you with this group of children, of students or youth, but finding those connections, absolutely. Yeah. So yep, there you go.
For students with medical issues, I don't ask, them when they come in the office right away, what's going on? Your lips are blue, which means he's had a low oxygen level. I don't ask about the blue lips because I know everyone else asks that. The nurse does, the teachers notice it. So then they come into my office and we just start chatting, and then they leave, and then I'll go to the nurse and say, hey, I noticed this kid had blue lips, and I know they're just sick of other people asking about that. So that's related to a medical concern.
Okay. So then how do you make sure, wait, I'll ask her, you have to, how do you make sure that someone's attending to the medical issue? if you're kind of ignoring it at the time because of that, because you know everyone else is addressing it.
Because everyone else is addressing it, so I always go to the nurse after I have my session.
Got it.
So I'll go and make sure, check up on
So you're following up then with that child. Yeah. Okay, so some of the things that are so obvious, right, that maybe those things we don't need to address, that because we know other people are taking care of those things. So you hear about, I'm thinking about too, kids who might have been in a fight, in school. Do we need to be the next person to bring it up again and again and again? There may be other people who have already addressed it, so what else can we talk about? Okay, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
We have a student who has limited mobility, so is often being brought down the hallway in his wheelchair or in like a stander or a walker, and is always with a one-on-one assistant. And I feel like a lot of the other adults that I see interacting with them in the hallway are asking the adult, oh, how's he doing today? Oh, what's he going to be for Halloween? Oh, how's he feeling today? Is he having a good day? So just because I always try to talk to him and ask him like, oh, what are you going to be for Halloween? Or, oh, is this a new shirt? Or, I don't really know the student that well. He's not in my class, but I feel like a lot of the attention that he gets is like via his helper.
Yes.
And so I try to always make sure that I engage directly with him.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, that sometimes we go to the assistant rather than talking to the person. Yeah. Good point. My dad just passed away recently, but had Alzheimer's, and I noticed that he still had a decent amount of skills at the end, but I noticed some people would come in and go right and start talking to the caregiver, and I'm like, my dad's just sitting right there. Ask him, even if the caregiver's going to jump in, but clearly had some cognitive issues. But it's like, dignity, right? Give him the dignity. Don't pretend or don't act like he's not there. Yeah. Sarah.
To kind of piggyback off of her comment over there about not always addressing like maybe the obvious medical needs, made me kind of think of, I have a student who's in high school, and I've been working with him for about 3 years now, and he has a lot of behaviors, and he's pretty much constantly in trouble and have behavior plan, and the school is all over it though. They're addressing it, it's handled, and so I found that when I pick him up and work with him, at first I was talking with him a lot about the behaviors too, and we had a not great relationship, and I finally just decided to just like throw it out the window and not even address it, like not ask him how he's been doing, and not just instantly like talk to him about like, oh, what's, sports are you watching, or that sort of stuff, and just not even ever talk about the behaviors. And our relationship has grown so much to the point now that I actually can talk to him sometimes about the behaviors, and he's more open with me about like why he's feeling frustrated or what's going on, because that's not just all we talk about.
Right. Like if we think about those kids or your person with the medical issues, if 8 people are asking you about that in the day, it gets, right, ad nauseum, right? Everybody's asking me, I know I'm sick, or I know I've been acting out. Do we need that many people to be grilling about the same thing? Let me have some relationships with people. Okay. How about another one that I've been hearing a lot about with my friend group who have middle schoolers is drama, like the girl drama, boy drama, but particularly the girl drama. So how are you building relationships with kids, kids with sensory issues, when there's all the drama going on, those of you particularly that are working with middle schoolers or high schoolers? So what strategies are you using to build relationships there? Yes.
I have a student who's in 5th grade now, and she struggles with understanding social language. So like when someone asks her to please stop singing, she thinks that person hates her and they hate her voice and all this other kind of stuff, which granted, she doesn't have the most beautiful voice, but the person was not trying to be mean. Like even when she described it, she said, they asked me to please stop singing, like with the word please. So she just doesn't understand it. So we have to have this conversation about how like, oh, I'm sure it wasn't that they were upset with the sound of your voice, or that they hate your voice or your singing. Maybe they're just trying to work really hard on something, like trying to make them see point of view of other person.
Yes.
Because socially she just doesn't get it. Like everyone's kind of against her. It's kind of her viewpoint on things. So just kind of explaining it from the other point of view to like be like, oh, I'm sure it's not this. Like it's not anything negative about you. They just need this, so that she understands like, oh, okay. Because to her, it is all about her. And that's kind of what the student, like she thinks that everyone's kind of out to get her is kind of almost her mindset, which is sad. But like we have to work on understanding just those social cues because she doesn't get it.
Yeah. So kind of acknowledging that, yeah, they said that, but let's try to take a different perspective about it too. And the fact that students are coming up to you and bringing those topics up, how great is that, right? That they feel comfortable, you already have a relationship with them, that they can come up and say, you know, that they're struggling with some of these things and I don't know why they're telling me this. So, okay, yeah, Chloe.
So I feel like I usually try to start by remembering that whatever is the stress or the drama that's happening, like that's the biggest stress in their life at their age and their situation. And so what's stressful for us as adults is not going to be what's stressful for a kid. So someone being mean, yeah, that's the biggest thing in their life at that moment. So I like to validate their stress. Like, yeah, that for you, that sucks and that's hard and like, and I get it, and I totally understand it, and try to relate to that, and then be able to kind of move in from that. But if they don't feel like you actually think it matters or means something, then you're not going to get anywhere. So I like to let them know, like, no, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I feel that way too.
Yep.
And then, okay, so now where are we going to go from here?
Yeah, good. So important to validate, to acknowledge. You don't want to dismiss someone's feelings. Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. So first acknowledging, yeah, that hurt your feelings, or yeah, I would feel that way too, or I can understand where you're coming from, and then move from there. Okay, any others? Okay. This is a quote I really like. I don't know if you're familiar with Yuri Bronfenbrenner's work, but his quote is something like, every child needs one person who is crazy about him. And I think especially when we talk about children with challenging behavior, you know, you might be that person, right? You might be the one who makes that connection, who that child feels safe coming to you and talking about someone hurting their feelings or a stressor they have at home, or they didn't make a sports team, or whatever the stressor is, whatever they're struggling with, you might be that person. So kind of keeping that in mind too, that sometimes it's the children we may not think about as often. You know, they may be the ones who are engaging in challenging behavior all the time, but they need one of us to be crazy about them. So what are the benefits of having relationships? Certainly they influence children's development across areas. They help them develop better relationships or more secure relationships as adults, right? So kind of we build from what we start with younger. They help reduce the frequency of challenging behavior, so kids who feel connected with someone when they come to school, with the adults in their environment, with their peers, less likely to engage in challenging behavior. Help them with their self-esteem. So as we build relationships, we can insert or we can give them feedback, help them feel good about themselves, and then child engagement. So children who have relationships are more likely then to be engaged during class, during activities, at home, when they have relationships with adults. Okay, so let's think about families then. How many of you on a regular basis interact with the families of your students? Some percent of you, some of you don't as much. What are some things, so talk to your colleagues for a minute, what are some things you do to stay connected or to get connected to families? Do you know what's happening? Do you wish it was different than how it is now? So maybe some of you didn't raise your hand, so maybe you're not connected very much with families. Do you think it's important for the age group, for the type of students you're working with? If so, are there things you could do, and what could they be so that you could be connected? Because might it impact the work you're doing with the children or the students, the youth at school. So talk for a few minutes about families and the connections you have with the families of your students.